I want to give a big thank you to all my patrons, and I'll be doing a Kingsguard roll call after today's video. Welcome back to the Fantasy Network, everyone. My name is, of course, Jimmy Nuts, and today I have to make an admission. I have a problem with starting series. I will put a little bit of the blame on my random Patreon wheel that I do here on the channel every month, but it's also on me. I start a lot of series. I used to not do that. I used to complete things and then move on to the next, but there's always this one of chasing the next best thing and bringing you different types of content here on the channel as well. So I tallied up all of the series that I am in the middle of, and it's 37. Yikes. It's even worse than that, though, because I am not counting series that are waiting on their next book, like Stormlight Archive or The Burning by Evan Winters. I'm also not counting any universe stuff like Culture or Discworld, where you can kind of just pick one up as you go. All of those type of books I'm leaving off this list. These are ones that are, sequential in order, and you have to read them in order. And 37 is not good. I'm going to list them as DNFs. I am going to list them as continuing but not a priority, and also list them as priority. So that are those are the three sections these will go into. Obviously with DNF, I'm not going to say that these are all hard DNFs, and I might kind of distinguish between some of them. I don't like speaking in absolutes because in my experience in my life as I've gotten older, I have realized that speaking in absolutes usually results in me looking like an ass later down the road. So whenever I say DNF, I just mean that it's nowhere in my mind and maybe possibly already down the road, but for now, definitely DNF. I cannot talk about each book in great detail. I cannot go on and on and on, because even if I did do 1 minute per book here, or book series, that would be 37 minutes, and this intro is already getting too long. So I'm going to be brief. I am very rarely brief, but today I'm going to, because I don't want to be here for 45 minutes to an hour, and I know you probably don't want to sit through that either. So if you would like me to elaborate on any of these series, or why they're being DNF'd, or maybe make an argument for them even, do it down in the comments below, and I will respond to you with all the details and reasons why. There will be a couple that I do elaborate on. For the most part, though, I'm going to keep this short. And I have a list here on my phone. I'm literally just going to scroll through, and as I hit a series, it's either getting, priority, maybe later, DNF. And then that's just kind of how it goes. And then first one on the list is a polarizing one, and that is the Wheel of Time. Wheel of Time is going to fall into the DNF category. And the reason being is, quite frankly, I just didn't get blown away by book 4 like everyone else. Then I waited a year, read book 5, and I liked it even less. Basically, what the cycle with Wheel of Time is I will kind of forget about it. I'll hear other people talk about how much they love it. I'll fire up an old Daniel Green video where he talks about Wheel of Time, and I'll go, God, that sounds pretty good. And then I'll read about 20 pages and go, oh yeah, I don't like this. This is not for me. And I'll repeat that cycle probably for the rest of my life until I eventually finish the series. But really, that's a DNF. It's a DNF. I haven't read one in over a year and a half now, I think. So I feel pretty confident saying that this is a DNF for that series. I'm sorry, Wheelies. I'm sorry. Next up is the sci-fi series, and that is Numana, I think is how it's pronounced. Book number 1 was Axioms End by Lindsay Ellis. Book 2 came out. I don't know if there's a book 3. This is a DNF. The book was okay. I kind of wanted to read sci-fi. I read this, and about a week after, I was like, okay, I'll never continue this. So that's an easy DNF for me. Quest for Heroes by Stephen Arion. Book 1 was The Coward, and book 2 was The Warrior. This is just a duology, and this is one I will continue, but it is not a priority. I will get to it at some point. Book 2 is only like a 400-page standalone, and I thought the first one was fine and a good romp. I'm sure the second one will be as well. Ender's Game Saga by Orson Scott Card. I've only read book 1, which was Ender's Game, which after a time being away from it, I felt like I liked it a little bit less. And to be quite frank, I don't think this is one that I will continue anytime soon. So I feel pretty safe putting this on the DNF list. Maybe one day, probably not. Rising Saga. Now this is one that has sequels. I read the first trilogy, so I'm through the first 3, but obviously now there are 2 more books to come out in the sequels. This is one I will continue. It is not a priority because I'm going to wait till the last book is out. I do own the first 2. I'll buy the third one when it comes out, but these are not ones that I'm chomping at the bit to get to and wait for the book releases. So this will be underneath a continued series, but not a priority. The 5 Warrior Angels by Brian Lee Durfee. This is a trilogy. I've read the first 2 books, and the last book, Lonesome Crown, just came out. This is a priority for 2023. I want to wrap up this trilogy. I have really enjoyed what BLD has given us thus far, and it'll be nice to actually cross a series off this list as finished. So this is a priority for 2023, no doubt. There is a lot of sci-fi on here, I'm noticing, that I have to address. And one of the reasons why I want to cut down on some of these series, and I'm being ruthless with these DNFs, so don't hate on me for this, but the reason why is there's new fantasy I want to read, old fantasy I want to read, and there's also a ton of science fiction I really want to get to, hopefully this year in the back half. But one of the sci-fi series that I did begin was Hyperion, the Hyperion Cantos. Number 1, I read book 1, never read book 2. This is on the will continue but not a priority, but I do believe that this will be bumped to a priority after I finish off some of my commits for 2023. So this is right there with another series, which we can address right now, which is Dune by Frank Herbert. I'm going to read all the Frank Herbert books. I've read the first 2. Dune Messiah was not as good as book 1 for me, but I want to continue and see the weirdness that happens. So that is also a continue, but not a priority at this moment. The Dresden Files by Jim Butcher. I feel like there's a sunken cost fallacy with Dresden. And as soon as I say one way or another, I'm going to get a comment about it. But Dresden Files is not a priority, but I am going to continue. And mainly that's because I own the next 2 books, which I can't even... Proven Guilty, I think, is the next one. I don't know. These books are good time. They're fine. And they're also easy to fit in. So I think it'd be ridiculous for me to say that I'm never going to read it again, even though my DNFs aren't super absolute. I just think it would be disingenuous of me to say that I'm DNFing this, because I'm not. I will probably fit in at least 1 or 2 of these this year at the minimum. And they're also really easy to do on audio. So Dresden is a continue, but not a priority. I think it was a bit of a priority at one point, and it's kind of fallen down a little bit as I've went on, even though it does seem like it's getting a little bit better. A Landfit for Heroes by Richard K. Morgan. I read The Steel Remains, thought it was really intriguing, had a lot of really interesting world concepts. Did not strike with me too much in the writing style, which is just a style choice. I think a lot of other people probably would. This is one of like the big Grimdark series. I started book 2 and then DNF'd it, and I will be DNFing A Landfit for Heroes. There's nothing else there that is really pushing me on, and I found myself not enjoying my time with it very much. So this is definitely on the DNF list, unfortunately. The Chronicles of Amber by Roger Zelazny is a series that I talk about a lot. I've only read the first 2. I have definitely heard a lot more talk about this from authors that I love, but the Chronicles of Amber are absolutely a series that I will be continuing, but it will not be a priority moving forward. And then we jump into the next series on the list, which is The Books of Babel. I've only read book 1, Sentineless Ends, and this is a DNF. I think it's really well written. I think this works for a lot of people. It doesn't work for me. There's nothing technically wrong with it. It's a me problem. Sentineless End is definitely a DNF. The Witcher. This is a continue, not a priority. I've only read The Last Wish. I had a good time with it. I think better than what seems to be most people. I've heard some people enjoy the short stories, not so much the novels. We'll find out how I feel, but I don't know if it'll be anytime soon. I am collecting those illustrated editions or the new hardbacks or whatever. They're pretty, and I like the games a lot. So we'll see. Seven Kennings by Kevin Hearn. A Plague of Giants was book 1. I believe this was a Patreon pick from Jennifer, and this is a series that I'm going to say DNF, but it's a soft DNF. There's a lot to like about this. I thought the writing was awesome. I really enjoyed the use of perspective here, and it had giants, which is awesome. But it's not something that is jumping out to me to get done in this year or maybe even next. So I'm going to soft DNF this one for now. Chronicle of the Unhewn Throne. I read Emperor's Blades. DNF all day. There's no reason for me to continue this at all. Alex Stern by Lee Bardugo. Ninth House was the first book. I just picked up Hellbent, which means I am continuing this. This is possibly going to be a priority because I find myself looking at book 2 and kind of wanting to know what happens after the ending of book 1. I really like Ninth House. This is not one I would have expected to like, but I do. And Lee Bardugo is super, smooth with the writing. I don't think that she's like a wordsmith by any stretch of the imagination, but I like the story. So this is continue, not a priority, but, almost there. The Lotlands. Book 1 was The Grey Bastards. I read this. RJ recommended it to me, and I did have a good time with this. This is super Sons of Anarchy inspired. It made me want to rewatch that show, but unfortunately is not a series that I have thought about since I have read it, so I'm going to say this one is also a DNF. The Deed of Pascanarian, which The Sheep Farmer's Daughter is book 1 in this, and then I think there's another sub-series. It's by Elizabeth Moon, military fantasy, female protagonist. I like this. I'm going to say this is a continue, but not a priority. I do know book 2 is on my Patreon wheel, so that could end up becoming a priority whether I wanted to or not, but I like this series. The Kingkiller Chronicles I read book 1, Name of the Wind, last year. It's one of my most popular reviews, and I had a great time with that book. Not an all-time favorite, but definitely a really amazing time, and I will read Wise Man's Fear. I know that it is more polarizing than Name of the Wind, and people always have an opinion about it, and we'll see what mine is probably in the near future. This is right below priority for me. The Winnowing Flame Trilogy by Jen Williams starts off with the 9th raid, and then the second one I think is Bitter Twins. I began that, I DNF'd it, and I will be DNFing this series. Jen Williams has a lot of really cool ideas. They're eldritch horror elements, but not for me. I didn't think the writing was very remarkable either, so for me, this is a good, hard DNF. Earthsea by Ursula K Le Guin is a priority, actually, in 2023. I'm going to read book 4, and also Wars of Light and Shadow by Janie Wirtz. We're supposed to be doing a read-along with a couple other booktubers. It has taken almost a year to get this thing to kick off. I'm hoping it actually happens here in 2023 because I did like the first book and want to see what else is in this world. That is also a priority. So Earthsea and Wars of Light and Shadow are going to be hopefully read and continued in 2023. Mistborn Era 2. This is a soft DNF because I actually own the first 3 books. So I feel like eventually I'm just going to peel it off the shelf, read it, and be like, that was fine. I've only read book 1. I didn't have a blast with it. It was okay. It was just fine, and there's other stuff I'd rather read, so this is definitely a DNF at this point. The Reborn Empire by Devin Madsen. We Ride the Storm was my biggest surprise of 2022, and this is one that I do want to continue. It is not a priority for 2023, but it is up there, and I will continue it at some point. I think that this series is a whole lot of fun. The Expanse is the definition of continue, but not a priority here on my channel. I've done one a year for the last 2 years, and that might continue for the next 9 years or whatever it might be with the short stories. Who knows? But Expanse is just something that I enjoy a ton when I get to it, but it's never like knocking down my door to be read. And it's mostly because I've watched the TV show, and I think the TV show is just as good as the books, which is heresy, as a book reader. But for me, it's just true. Gentlemen Bastards by Scott Lynch. I've read the first 2 books of this, and book 3 is Republic of Thieves, and this is going to be a definite continue, but not a priority. I don't think there's any rush with this being unfinished, but Republic of Thieves is one that I will be happy to get to when I do. Covenant of Steel by Anthony Ryan. Book 1 was the prior. This was the Patreon pick, and this is getting the hard DNF. I will never continue this series. I think this is probably a great book that just didn't work for me. The Black Company by Glenn Cook is without a doubt a priority and very high. In fact, I loved book 1, which people say is one of the weaker ones. I will definitely be continuing The Black Company in 2023. It is without a doubt a priority. And then following that is one that I read towards the end of 2022, and that was the Ashen Sand Trilogy by Richard Nell. I was mixed, but mostly positive on book 1. And this one went from being a priority, it really was, to unfortunately dropping into a continue at a later date. I don't know when that will be, but I don't feel drawn to this right now. And there's actually been one time where I went to pick up book 2 and I went for something else. And that's just how it goes sometimes. Maybe it'll bounce back up into priority once some of these other ones fall off, but I would say it's probably, very much in the middle of all of these series that I'm going to be continuing at a later date. Shadow March by Tad Williams. I've only read book 1, and this is absolutely a priority. I had a blast with the first book. I love Tad Williams. I've not read anything by him that I thought was bad, and I will continue to read everything that he's ever put out. So this is a priority, so then I can move on to his other stuff like Otherland and Last King of Ostenard. Remembrance of Earth's Past, which starts with the 3-body problem. I've read Dark Force, and I am about 400 pages away, I think, from completing book 3 Deaths. And this is #1 priority for me on all my TBR. It's why I'm reading it right now, so early in the year. Phenomenal sci-fi, and Death's End right now, at least, is shaping up to be my favorite of the trilogy. We'll see how I feel about the end. I know some people are hit or miss on that, but Remembrance of Earth's Past, without a doubt, is #1 priority for 2023. The Bound and the Broken starts out with A Blood and Fire by Ryan Cahill. This is a self-published fantasy series. I gave book 1 a shot. I thought it was just okay, and this is a hard DNF, maybe convinced to be a soft DNF, because I did hear he comes into his own when later in the series. I don't know how much I necessarily care. So for this one, this is probably going to be a DNF. Under the Northern Sky by Leah Carew. The Wolf I thought was good. Not great, but enough there to definitely make me want to continue. So this is actually also a priority for 2023. And then depending on how book 2, The Spider, lands, it could drop into continue at a later date. There's only 3 books, but it was right on that edge. So it's a very low, it's a priority, but it's like the last of them, I would say, that are on my list. The Lycanius Trilogy by James Islington. I've already kind of talked about this. I can elaborate in the comments. It's not perfect, but it is a priority mainly because I just need to find out what happens and then I can move on with my life. I do think it's kind of fascinating, even though it's not perfect. And then we have Red Queen's War by Mark Lawrence, my arch nemesis, of course. This is a DNF. This one's pretty easy. I didn't vibe with this very much at all, even though I do think that there's some good stuff in there. Just wasn't for me. I'll try Mark Lawrence, his other works at another time. This isn't a DNF on Mark Lawrence totally, but Red Queen's War is a miss and definitely a DNF for me. Temeraire, I think is how you say it, by Naomi Novik. This is, the Napoleonic Wars with dragons. There's 9 books, which is crazy. I enjoyed book 1. I thought it was good, but they didn't give me what I would like about a book about Napoleonic Wars with dragons. It went a different direction, I would say, than I thought. The relationships were really good. This is a soft DNF. Maybe if I'm craving a dragon book that's short, easy on the ears with Simon Vance narrating, which is great, maybe I'll pop it back in. But for now, I would say this is a soft DNF. And that should be it. Around 37. I hope I didn't skip any. There's absolutely a chance that I did. But the priorities for this year, in no particular order, will be Shadow March by Tad Williams, Lycanius Trilogy by James Islington, which I'm probably pronouncing wrong, Remembrance of Earth's Past by Cixin Liu, I don't know how to say his name, 5 Warrior Angels by Brian Lee Durfee, Earthsea by Ursula K Le Guin, Wars of Light and Shadow by Janie Warts, The Black Company by Glenn Cook, and Under the Northern Sky by Leo Carew. And then once these start falling off, some of this other stuff is going to move up that was in the continue but at a later date. And also there's other stuff that I'm going to be sliding in here. The Donovan series is a sci-fi series that I keep hearing about, and I can't remember the author's name. Michael Gear, Michael Gear. I think there's a lot of other stuff that I want to fit in. So once these priorities start getting hammered down, I can start getting into other series that I want to continue, and also new authors. For instance, Octavia E. Butler is someone that I also want to read this year. And if you want to see all the authors that I plan to read for the very first time in 2023, you can check out that video here on the channel. If you like this video, hit like. If you loved it, think about subscribing. There's a Patreon in the description. It's optional, but always appreciated. Drop down in the comments and let me know if you need me to elaborate on any of these decisions, or if you'd like to argue for some of these series, because I'm always open for dialogue. And honestly, you could probably sway me either way. I try to keep an open mind about these things. But until I see you next time, be good, be safe, and remember to always keep turning the page. I want to give a special shout out to all my patrons, especially my Kingsguard, which include Lauren Henrik, Kai, Eric B, Oscar Stewart, Stephen R, Ikaika, Amanda, RJ Shad, Nicoletta Tanner, Jennifer Garrick, Frank C, Evie Fever, Jay, Sarah, Pat, Kevin, Ryan, Michael, Terrence Wade, Darren, Taylor D, Derry, John C, Boss, Mitch, Sebastian, Benjamin, Jobot, Noel, Amanda L, Kyle C. Scott, Steve Talks Books, Caitlin S, Dylan M, Yolanda, and Carlos. Thank you all so much. You're the best.